We have to change that narrative because scaring people doesn't get people to do things. Just that doesn't work. And we've been doing that on climate for 30 years now, and it hasn't worked for 30. And as a good marketing person will tell you, if nobody's buying your product, you need to change the market and the message. So it's time to change the message.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started.
Hello, and welcome again to our podcast series, Rework, the Sustainable Development Chronicles. I'm your host, Dave Karpuk. In each session of this series, we'll focus on one or more of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and their impact on the profession of facility management. The Sustainable Development Goals, part of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, constitute an urgent call for global action to end poverty and other deprivations with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. Today, we'll be looking at SDG 13, climate action, SDG 9, building resilient infrastructure, and more. My guest is Mark Bernstein, a true innovator in the field of value-based sustainability. Mark is a management consultant who works with startups and other businesses to shape responsible leadership on sustainability, as well as co-founder and president of Earthshot, a nonprofit that seeks to inspire climate action by engaging people in activities that immerse them in a positive, empowering clean tech message. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me today.
Great. Well, let's get right down to business. Mark, one of the things that I think distinguishes you from a lot of other folks who work for the cause of sustainability and talk about the need for action to save the environment is your positive message that clean tech is cool. What can you tell me about how you came to this positive outlook and how you sustain it in the face of increasingly dire evidence of the precarious situation our planet's in?
So a couple things. First, we'll go back and start with Star Trek, which I watched in reruns, the original Star Trek, and became interesting in tech and sci-fi and stuff. But you think about the technology that was there, and then I was heavily involved in environment and energy, and so I've always been engaged in thinking about how tech can change the world. And as I progressed in my career, I worked early on consumer behavior issues, and it's just hard for consumers to change. It's really hard for us to get people to change the things they do. And so we need to bring technology into the equation to make it easier and so that people don't necessarily have to sacrifice or make huge changes. And so that's how I came to kind of this, tech is really cool and interesting. And I grew up in the early period and then computers, and I've watched that whole transition, and it's really cool and it's really fun. And it can be for sustainability too.
Yeah, I think, I think I told you last time we talked that I've been to lectures where the message is, an urgent call for climate action, but it is presented in such dire terms that you really walk out thinking, wow, is it worth trying to do anything? And you're just a breath of fresh air in that
Well,
atmosphere.
but that's what we have to change, right? We have to change that narrative because scaring people doesn't get people to do things. Just that doesn't work. And we've been doing that on climate for 30 years now, and it hasn't worked for 30. And as a good marketing person will tell you, if nobody's buying your product, you need to change the market and the message. So it's time to change the message on climate.
Yep. Probably past time, but glad you're here to do it. I love the Earthshot website. It's got features like games and graphic novels that try to make sustainability a fun topic. What kind of following are you attracting with this?
So what we're looking to get are 20 somethings. So when we were looking at building Earthshot, we go, okay, we need to change the narrative. We need to give people this positive, clean tech vision of the future. Who are the ones who are feeling it the most hopeless and who are the ones that can make the biggest difference? And those are 20 somethings. And we asked, where are they? Well, they're on video games and social media. So if we're going to get to them, we got to get clean tech into video games, get them talking about it and inspired to do so. That's, so in Earthshot, we are beginning to build that following among 20 somethings who are really going to be the forefront of transitioning to clean tech.
And it's even fun for 60 somethings.
Yes. Yeah, we're not saying no to anybody else, but there are the bulk of the gamers are in their 20s. There are 3.5 billion people who play a game every day in the world. And so if we're getting on this, let's get it in.
Okay, another big part of the website is the spotlight that you put on clean tech providers. I know that's also a focus of your consulting practice. What are some of your favorite products that you've highlighted, and how have you seen them being used?
So there are a lot of products I could talk about, but a lot of it's kind of there are different things. So one company who seals ductwork in commercial office, right? We don't get the fact that we lose a lot of energy just on leaking ductwork, and they just go in and blow stuff through and seal the ductwork. Great, 10% off your energy bill overnight. Simple. We're beginning to see that happen. Innovations in lighting. Lighting is another big thing, is controlling lighting, and then building controls, right? And now the morphing of these software building control things using artificial intelligence, GPT and other things to actually make buildings a lot smarter to save energy. Got a company doing natural fiber insulation to replace fiberglass, and company making solar windows. So you can replace your commercial office windows with windows that actually produce power at the same time. So it's high insulation, reduces some energy, and it returns on the investment, and it looks good.
Yeah, I love the solar windows. What are one of the perceived drawbacks, though, of these green products has for a long time been the notion that they're more expensive than their conventionally produced alternatives. But when we were talking recently, you told me that's often no longer the case. What's made the difference there?
Technology change and innovation and entrepreneurs. I've been in this business a long time. So 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, I was selling people on sustainability stuff that cost me, right? And it did. It paid off, but it took 8 to 10 years to pay off. And it's hard for a company to do that. That's all changed. The innovations in technology, not just from solar, but some of these other things I talk about, make the clean tech introduction the best business decision. They're cheaper, they're more efficient, and their payback is really short. Sometimes even immediate, sometimes maybe a year or two, but that's really good return on investment. And so, it is the innovations in technology scale, the growth of it, particularly when it comes to solar, the production scale. And so we're beginning to see all those things emerge and converge into a place where all this technology, for the most part, is cheaper, better, more efficient. Now, sometimes it costs a little more upfront, but you save money right away.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's the term of the payback that, as I understand what you had told me, is really changing. People are seeing that return almost immediately.
Right. I'll give you an example of hybrid electric airplanes, company Ampere. And so they are retrofitting existing small airplanes with a hybrid electric powertrain. These planes, every so often, due to FAA regulations, have to go through an overhaul in a certain period of time. So for the same cost of doing that overhaul, they can put in a whole new powertrain. The minute you take off, you're saving 75%. And so it's, and that's all due to the fact that battery costs have come down a lot and more efficient. So the innovations that have happened all of a sudden created opportunity to change the game on how we look at clean tech.
Great, great. Getting into directly the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal 9, which focuses on building resilient infrastructure, promoting inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation, would seem to align closely with the kind of work you are supporting in your consulting practice and with Earthshot. A particular goal line, a particular objective is to significantly raise sustainable industry's share of employment and gross domestic product by 2030, particularly in the least developed countries where the goal is to double these figures. How do you see this playing out through the kind of work you're doing?
So I see it in a few ways. Firstly, you know, most of the clean tech stuff that reduces emissions also make you more resilient.
Mm.
That's the one thing we need to recognize. And we've seen this huge growth in clean tech jobs, across the world, right? And even with the slowdown in other sectors, that's still growing. And in the developing world, there is the introduction of these new technologies through different types of programs really can produce local jobs because a lot of it is putting things in. A lot of it can be made in different regions. It is being made in different regions. So all isn't just imported stuff and somebody from the outside coming and installing it. And then you begin to train people to repair it. And so a lot of work people doing, particularly with solar microgrids, for example, as we move into as both a climate change and a resilient thing, is creating opportunities for local communities to own them. And then you're training local people to repair them. So you're creating these long-term infrastructure by using the solar battery microgrid system that's bringing electricity to places that didn't have it, but also using the local folks and having them part of it. And so a number of opportunities there when it comes to retrofits of existing buildings. Again, all that takes people to do. And there are jobs there and they're well paid. They are also, and so training local take care of it. So as we build this resilient infrastructure that's also climate friendly, we're really creating new economic opportunities. And again, because now it's cheaper and better, it's actually the best economic decision for countries as well. Again, which wasn't always the case, right? When
Right.
I was doing rural solar stuff, it was, okay, a little expensive and, it's better than nothing, but it was kind of expensive. It was
Right.
still better in many of those countries when I was working in Africa and Southeast Asia than trying to string transmission lines, but it was still hard to do and hard to get out there. So I'll give you another example if you want I was just visiting Petra in Jordan. So Petra is this ancient city. If you ever seen Indiana Jones and the Lost Crusades, that they, at the end, they go through where the cup is. So I was there 15 years ago and there was kind of nothing around and inside there was not much. They still kept the inside pretty plain, but now on this walk up these 2,000 steps, this monastery, where there were little kind of rest stops with little people, in the past, it was just sort of some tea and stuff. Now they all have solar panels and refrigerator. So as you're going up there in this heat, you can have an ice cream or a drink, but they didn't string transmission lines is because they have solar panels up in these little huts and these little rest stops going up these steps. That's changed the game on how they can bring more tourists there, right? And then people can earn more money.
That's good. That's great. Petra's been on my bucket list for tourism. Now I've got something else to look out for when I finally
It's
make
great.
it there.
Solar panels everywhere.
Fantastic. Mark, I know that innovative, resource conserving building materials are a big focus of your effort. That certainly makes sense given the well publicized fact that the built environment is responsible for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. How are you seeing adoption of these innovative materials progressing? Are there geographies or industries where you see the use of these materials taking hold more strongly?
So I'd say in the last few years, we've seen an acceleration because, again, a bunch of new technologies have emerged. Green cement being one of them, zero carbon cement. So a couple of companies making really innovative cement products that can compete and are better than Portland cement. And some of these companies have raised lots of money and are accelerating the deployment as folks get used to the fact that you actually can do something differently. And we're beginning to see it mostly in places where there are some, regulatory push, in the US, like California, New York, and in Europe. But you're beginning to see it happen in other places too, because not only again, is this stuff better? It's actually they're competitive in price and actually easier to manage. And so, we're seeing this huge influx of stuff in cement. There are some new things happening in steel, in construction, modular housing units, using really innovative methods for producing structurally insulated panels to make it easier and more efficient to put up multi-story housing units affordably and sustainably. And so these, again, as we've seen these companies emerge over the last few years, they're really beginning to gain traction. Always pushback, but really beginning to see traction. And particularly in those areas where the policy encourages changes and carbon reductions.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's fascinating that these materials, concrete and steel that we've been using in the case of steel for thousands of years are, we're now finding ways to innovate within those old technologies and make them much more energy efficient and resource friendly than they were in the past.
Yeah, well, you think about cement and concrete, right? The Romans used it,
Yeah.
and we can still see stuff stand thousands of years later. The problem with Roman cement was it took too long to cure, right? And so as we didn't want to wait a week for something to cure, and so the recipe got lost for a while, and Portland cement came about, and really, really efficient in terms of use, but very heavily energy. The old Roman cement was based on different materials, and so a couple of companies have figured out how to take those materials, pozzolanic materials, they're called, and actually use them and cure them as fast as Portland cement, and they are actually higher quality than regular cement. And so we're basically taking ancient technology, bringing it in to today's world. And, if you think about the stuff we see in the old Roman technology, that stuff lasts a long time and we can build that way too. And so it's those types of kind of new and old innovations that are making a difference.
That's fantastic. In a recent article of yours that I read, you wrote about returning to a focus on energy efficiency. And in particular, you talked about an idea for an air conditioner swap out program that it would encourage low and middle income families to replace old, inefficient air conditioners with more efficient modern ones. In your words, you were saving both significant costs for them and significant resource demand on their utility providers. You suggested in Southern California, this program could save individuals about $100 on their annual electricity costs and could be the equivalent of taking offline a 60 megawatt power plant. Can you tell us more about this idea?
Yeah. So this comes about from my 20 years focus on energy efficiency. And last summer it was hot in California and came close to some blackouts. And so the governor said, well, we're really worried about blackouts. So maybe we should put some money in to extend the life of natural gas peak power plants. And I was wandering around mid city LA and I was looking up and seeing all these old window air conditioning units, halfway falling out, they're not installed right. And they're really old. And I said, they're all used at peak time, which is the evening in California. What if we just put new ones in? So thankfully, California, as opposed to pretty much any place else, actually collects data like that. And there was data to be found. And it turns out in the territories that Southern California Edison and Los Angeles Department of Water and Power produced, there are 250,000 room air conditioning units that are 9 years old or older. If you replace them and actually put them in right, you'll save 75% of the electricity overnight, right? And who are those people? They tend to be low income, maybe lower middle income. Those are the people that have those older units that are not installed, right? And so what you're doing is you're creating this opportunity to build a essentially a negative power plant, right? And so you're replacing these out, you're swapping them. People get better air conditioning. So they're actually now able to cool their apartments. Many times they're running these air conditioning and it's leaking and they don't operate well. So they're actually better able to handle the heat and everybody saves money, right? And we're saving peak power and it just makes economic sense and we can do it if we do it at scale, cheaper than what it would cost to run that power plant, that peak load natural gas power plant. But it's that type of thing we tend not to think about, right? We say, okay, we'll give them rebates. Rebates don't work because people can't really deal with the rebates. You got to go in and you got to tell utilities just go in and give everybody a new one. And then I was wandering around Manhattan looking at all those in New York City as well. I'm sure New York City has way more than Southern California. They don't have the data per se, but you could just go in and make everybody more comfortable, save huge amounts of energy. We do not pay enough attention to energy efficiency. We've done a lot, a lot of buildings have done lighting retrofits, but there's still plenty of buildings that haven't. And you get a third party that comes in and does it. It costs you nothing and you start saving money immediately. But but buildings still don't do it. And so we really need to push, and I really want to continue to push the need to not, to not ignore the fact that we still need to use energy more. And it just came out from walking around and looking at some air conditioning units that looked like they were falling out of the buildings.
A very timely observation, as we're getting into that season, even here in Boston, where I am. You're getting to the point where you walk down the street, you hear the air conditioning units humming and rattling as they work to keep people cool. It would be
Well,
great. To see.
and 30 years ago, you didn't have air conditioning there, right?
Yeah.
And so not only is it somewhat new, now it's adding burden to the electric system. It's new and inefficient at some point.
Yeah. Well, I hope the idea spreads to areas like mine.
We're working on trying to get people to notice it, and we're working on the state of California to implement the program.
Yeah. So you've written about sustainable technologies that, well, maybe like the concept of energy efficiency that we just talked about, that fly under the radar while we tend to focus on, bright, shiny, new objects. When you think about climate action, which is SDG 13, are there specific measures you think we're missing the boat on? And if there are, what could and should we be doing that most of us aren't thinking about?
And it's exactly, the efficiency, exactly the small pieces of things that people don't see that added together can produce more savings than solar. But investors flock to these things because they can point to it. But, sealing ductwork or, changing windows, or even in a new building, building some things into it that are going to make it super more efficient, just don't get the headlines. And they don't often get the investment either. And because people want to kind of see things and they invest in stuff that you can see and do. So, again, we're really missing the boat on efficiency and productivity for the most part is where I see, particularly in the climate space. And that we need to re-emerge that because we had a efficiency, as top of the mind during, the 80s and the oil price increases and stuff. And there was a lot of push to that. And we've kind of lost some of it. And it needs to come back because, we want to convert to 100% zero carbon energy, right? So that means lots of renewables and the things. So let's say you need 100 megawatts today. Okay. But let's say you cut that demand down and you only need 90 megawatts. It means you only need 90 megawatts of renewables. You don't need 100 megawatts. So it actually lets you achieve those zero emission goals faster when you're using less. And that isn't in the dialogue as much as it should.
No, but you know what? That leads right into the next topic I wanted to ask you about. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are targeted towards improvements we can make by 2030. And of course, that's less than 7 years away now. What do you see as the wins we should be focusing on in this next short time period leading up to 2030?
So other than efficiency, which we already talked about, the
Right.
other one I think we need to really focus on is agriculture. And I realize that's different than a lot of the listeners, but the agriculture sector, food waste, which is very relevant. So food waste by itself would be the fourth largest, if that was a country, the fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So We waste a lot of food. Agriculture itself could be more resilient and reduce its carbon emissions. If- And so we need to be looking at that as how we feed ourselves as a major thing. The other thing when it comes to the building industry, what we're saying, and agriculture, is a movement towards urban agriculture. So innovations in rooftop. I've been talking to somebody recently, on the innovations technology on rooftop gardens, agriculture, not just general plants, actually growing food on commercial rooftops. It has a whole bunch of benefits, including reduces air conditioning because it cools, and it actually has a significant measurable impact on reducing energy use in a building, while at the same time, you can grow actual food that people can actually eat on the roof, on the walls, and on the ground. And so thinking about food is the other thing, particularly around the goals for climate and sustainability and everything else, is really important.
So Mark, what's next on your agenda? What new efforts are you going to be focusing on as we move forward?
So a few things. We're continuing in Earthshot to try to put cleantech into video games. We're beginning to build our first thing, which is a cleantech world in Fortnite. Fortnite is a big popular game, and you can actually build your own environment in there. And we're going to build cleantech you know, into a Fortnite world and hope 20-year-old. But the other thing I'm focused on are young, diverse entrepreneurs in the cleantech space. So what we're seeing also amongst the emerging technologies is people of different backgrounds, different colors in the LGBTQ community, young entrepreneurs emerging with really cool, interesting ideas. And they have hurdles because the system of investment is still focused on straight white men. And so they often have to run through more hoops, but they are often more motivated and innovative in their thing. So my focus is kind of looking and helping support and develop through some other groups, innovations coming out from young entrepreneurs who are not only the ones minds we're trying to change at Earthshot, but some already doing it and they're already emerging as the next tech leaders in the clean tech space. And so that we're trying to encourage them and move these forward. So we begin to get all these new tech ideas out there and deployed across the world.
Well, graduation season is upon us, so hopefully you'll be getting another whole influx of leaders of the future coming at you.
There are a whole bunch of college graduates. They've learned stuff in college and they come out of college and they're starting their own business. And many in the clean tech space. And I'm continue to be amazed by what they've come up with and how they've emerged. And just need to support them. And we need to provide them opportunities to do that.
Well, if anybody can pass along that positive message, I think it's you, Mark. I really want to thank you for your time today, Mark, and for your really inspiring insights into the clean tech future that's going to help us save the planet for future generations. I want to urge everyone listening to this podcast to check out the earthshot.us website and to join Mark and his team in this positive approach to climate action that Mark and his team are taking. And Mark, you'll catch me at the butcher looking for the 3D printed steaks.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here and looking forward to chatting with everybody in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more incredible content.